Hi, this is Ian Brigette from Alar Systems, and I'm here with one of our senior artists, Brian Barnett.
Hello.
And we are talking today about baked lighting with a personal project that Brian was doing over his past vacation time, and it has turned out, as y'all can see, really, really gorgeous. Just exceptionally high quality lighting.
Thank
And
you.
some of these art assets, I recall you were saying you built from scratch. Some of it is from asset packs you were working with, but all of the lighting and kind of quality of what we see here is 100% you.
Yeah, that's correct. Some of the more complex assets, like the bed and the couch, anything cloth oriented, was purchased. And then some of these other assets, like these candles and stuff here, they were purchased. But like the mirror, the armoire, the lamps, the chairs, the table, the you know, it's about like a 50-50 split. The room, of course, was me. So the trim and the molding and the door. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's looking really good. Would you be willing to expand the view a little bit more from
Sure.
the base?
Sure.
Perfect. Even better.
Yeah.
So I remember when we were talking about this earlier, you mentioned that part of your project was you wanted to see how good you can make the lighting look with baked lighting for pipelines where we're trying to target things like mobile development or other pipelines where we don't have the ability to do real ray trace lighting.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So this was kind of my personal R&D on baked lighting and how I can really push that to its limits. And I wanted to get as close to hyperreal as possible. So I just dove in deep, did a bunch of research, and just modeled up a quick bedroom. And the majority of this room is actually being lit by the skylight. It's not actually the regular lights that you see here are doing very little, but illuminating the objects that are in the vicinity. I wanted the skylight to do the majority of the grunt work here. So if I just go to lighting only and close the materials out, you can see that most of that is the skylight. What you see on the walls and the ground is the skylight. And then the rest, of course, is regular lights. Um, so yeah, I just did that. I modeled up some quick assets and I made some normal maps. I really tweaked the UVs. One set for textures, one set for light maps. Um, and I wanted to maximize the UV space on a lot of these assets so we can get crisp texture detail and some pretty smooth um, light bounces and shadows.
Is it fair to say that you prefer to make your own light map UVs rather than using the generated,
That is correct.
more control over the density?
Definitely more control over the density. With light map UVs, you have to be very methodical on where you what UV islands you maximize for light bounces or for light casting. You don't if you have something like this tic-tac-toe board, for instance. For one thing, I believe if I lift this up, there is no bottom of it, or there is. Yeah, so I deleted the bottom of that, and that's because if I put that on a UV sheet, that'll take up UV space, which results in texture and light map space. So what I did was I only deleted the parts that we won't see, and then the parts that are clearly visible, I went ahead and maximized out on the tic-tac-toe board's UV island. And then things that you won't really see, like hidden edges or like the corner or the bottom of things, like those are really small in the 0 to 1 space. But you want them equally spaced out too, so you don't get light map bleeding. And UV4 does a pretty good job of generating light map UVs, but that human touch is still kind of pretty nice to have on some of these assets.
That makes sense. So a couple of notes I wanted to ask about were number one, what makes this light map baking that you've done here different from what comes prepackaged with UE4?
Yeah.
And then the other one was more about the light bleeding again. But let's start with the first question. How is this different from the CPU light baking that's built in?
Yeah, so there's an individual, his name is Lu Shuang. I hope I pronounced that right. He has come out with a GPU light map baker. And effectively what it's doing, it is utilizing the GPU's power as opposed to the CPU's power. And I'm not really a programmer or on that technical side of things, but basically his results are a lot more accurate than the standard Unreal Lightmap Baker for some reason. I don't know if it's the CUDA cores in the GPU or something that has to do with the GPU, or it's just simply him himself who's made it better. But with that, you get better global illumination. You don't get as many light map bleeding issues. The light map density is dispersed evenly when the light bakes. Like if I were to bake this with the CPU, a lot of the splotchiness you would see on the walls, even at a higher light map resolution, for some reason would be more pronounced. But for his light map baker, which utilizes the GPU, when you hit the bake button, it just works. So it's pretty great.
And what was the length of time it took to bake this room? Do you recall?
Oh man. So to bake this room, it only took me like an hour. And not even that, maybe like 30 minutes, 45 minutes to bake this room at the higher light map density. And this was in...
and what graphics cards do you have that accomplished that?
So the graphics card I was using for this particular project was my 1080 Ti at home. I would imagine that something like an RTX, 20 or 30, would take half the time at that, and that's in I built that in production mode, like the highest build settings one could pick, like production mode high, and my world settings here. Yeah, the static lighting level I put at like 0.2, and the bounces I cranked up a lot.
That's a lot of bounces.
Yeah, it's a lot of bounces, and I've done some research, and people say like over 10 is overkill, but I was like, why the heck not? So I put 40. But yeah, like these settings would normally, slow down. It would definitely slow down the CPU, but a GPU, it just chomps right through it.
Awesome. So going back to a previous question of mine, and you started touching on this a little bit. When it comes to light bleeding, I remember in a previous discussion you mentioned you had to do some special adjustments to the scene just to make sure that there was less light bleeding around flat planes, especially around the window. Is that right?
Yeah. So if I'm going to go ahead and pull out of the room here. Outside, this is the outside. This is the HDRI. I just have like a unlit sphere that's kind of projecting the HDRI. It's a little overexposed out here, and that's simply to get a more powerful effect inside. But yeah, it doesn't really matter what you see outside because we're not paying attention outside. But this mesh right here that I have highlighted, if I lift it up, this is what I have to prevent light bleeding. I just call it like the light blocker. And effectively what it does is my mesh is here. If you look close, like I have the ceiling separated from the trim and the walls. And then for some reason or the other, even though these things are flush against to each other geometrically, for some reason when you bake out lighting, whether you're using CPU or GPU, we get light bleeding effects. And that is because there's nothing behind them to prevent that blocking. Even here on the window, so here, like I actually had to raise, you can't really see it well, but let me see, let me change the, is it this one? Yeah, I mean, you can kind of see it here. This balcony, as you can see here, I actually had to raise up. So the window frame here, I was actually getting some bleeding underneath the window frame. So you want to block out as much light as possible that could potentially bleed in, and you'll get a successful bake that way. Whether you're doing it GPU or CPU, that's for sure going to help prevent any light bleeding from happening. Any other bleeding you'd see would be from your skylight turned up too intensely.
That's fantastic. So I think that's probably a good place to stop, since this is, probably going to be a multi-part discussion, and we'll have a chance to get into all sorts of things: the UV packing, the specifics of how you set up the skylight, kind of turn into a multi-part series. The last question that I have is: would you be willing to pull up the web page with that GPU rendering?
Yeah,
that way, anyone watching the video can track it down.
Give me a second. Let me find it on my other screen here. It's right at the top of Google. So this is it right here. This is a very lengthy forum thread on the Unreal Engine forums. It's about 128 pages long, going strong. This is it right here, and it's called Louis Huang's GPU Lightmass, and he's got a few different versions here. It looks like on the front page here it goes up to 4.22, but it's actually up to 4.26 now, from what I understand. And I built this room at 4.25. So yeah, it's regularly updated, and it is amazing. So yeah, this is the hub of it all.
That's fabulous. All right, thank you so much, Brian, for telling us about your project. I think everyone's going to be really excited to try some of these things at home, and we will catch you later.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
All right, bye, everyone.